Perhaps best known for their iconic Navitimer pilot's watch and the diving-oriented Super Ocean, Breitling's modern collection also is home to a few gems that have a tendency to fly under the radar. One such watch was released in 2021, the Premier B09, a charming bi-compact chronograph pairing an in-house chronograph caliber with a striking pistachio green dial. It was such a standout for me when going through a shopping episode with Kevin O'Leary. I saw this watch in the case and I thought, I need to do a full in-depth review of this piece. And today is the day. Let's jump into it. So before we jump into this video looking at this really stellar chronograph for its price segment, if you want more things chronographs, check out our article looking at 27 of the best chronographs on the market, looking at a variety of different price ranges. That will be in the description down below. Also, if you're in the market for a chronograph and are looking for something mechanical but don't have quite the budget here, I'd recommend taking a look at some of Tissot's offerings, specifically the 1938 Telemeter. This is really defined by that telemeter scale on the outside. 1930s design. Telemeter was used back in the day for seeing artillery fires. So you'd fire the chronograph when you would see artillery fire, and then you would stop the chronograph when you would hear the sound to give you a sense of distance for your enemy. Although now not nearly as useful as it was on the battlefield back in the day, but still is a very cool looking watch. They have a gilt version as well as the silver dial version. But if you want something more sporty, then you take a look at the PRX chronograph, taking that integrated system with the bracelet and then also infusing that Valjoux caliber on the inside, coming under $2,000, well under $2,000. So incredible value for both of these watches. Check them out in the description down below. So when covering this B09, we're gonna break this down into a few different areas. First, getting some background on this collection because it is not as well known as some others from Breitling, then move into an overview of the piece, and then final thoughts at the end. Now, Breitling as a brand dates back to 1884. And over the course of its 138 years, Breitling has authored several legitimate horological icons, with the aforementioned Navitimer and Super Ocean serving as the brand's central mass market profit vehicles for decades. Now, Breitling's emphasis on sportier designs runs deep, with watches of that ilk making their appearance as early as the 1930s. It was shortly thereafter where the Premier name was first utilized on a Breitling chronograph in 1943, long before the introduction of either the Navitimer in 1953 or the Super Ocean 4 years later in 57. From its inception, the Premier aimed to combine an elevated aesthetic with just enough sporty upside for active use. After disappearing from the catalog sometime in the mid-20th century, Breitling has recently, under the new leadership of Georges Kern, began to reinvigorate storied designs from the brand, with the Premier collection getting its chance for a reboot in 2018. In the past on this channel, I have looked at the B01 and I've said that that's probably one of my favorite contemporary Breitling models, but this one I think takes it to another level. At that time of reviewing that watch, this watch didn't even exist. This watch comes with a smaller case and also a manual powered chronograph movement on the inside, and that's not even getting into the details of how amazing this dial looks when taking a closer look. So starting with a conversation on one of my favorite aspects of this updated Premier, we have a redesigned wearing dimension and experience highlighted by a smaller 40mm diameter compared to the 42mm metric from the automatic Premier. With modern Breitling in most cases associated with large, if not huge cases, the downsizing to 40mm feels like a sincere play toward the enthusiast community, and in addition to that, the lug-to-lug is also fairly restrained at 47.3mm, helping this 40mm case wear very true to its size despite the amount of real estate being occupied by that dial in comparison to the slender bezel. Thickness is also a pain point with mechanical chronographs, but this watch benefits greatly from the manual caliber on the inside, making this case 13mm thick. Though it is not the thinnest of cases around, it is thinner for a chronograph standard. Taking all of these metrics into account, the overall wearing experience is great, especially even on a smaller wrist, with the package striking a balance between its retro-inspired design scheme and modern sizing trends. Set between 20mm lugs, the Premier is also equipped with a thickly padded alligator strap, something that I don't typically see on Breitlings, and it offers a subtle glossy shimmer to its top. Tapering to 18mm, the strap terminates with a refined deployant buckle with an easily sized buckle that connects to the folding mechanism. For whatever reason, the strap also is oriented in the opposite position to the norm, with the strap tail facing the 6 o'clock side of the case. Typically, I prefer it the other way around, but it's just kind of more of a personal choice rather than a pain point. In addition to its well-positioned sizing, the Premier B09 also leans into a more elegant and refined case architecture and finishing than you find from other sportier Breitlings, with largely polished anterior surfaces, including on the stepped sloping bezel and ornate lugs featuring some curvaceous facets. The case sides are vertically brushed with a hit of 3 engraved lines that lend this piece some extra flair with changing lighting conditions. At 3, a broad and signed push-pull crown displays a mix of brushing and polishing while being a bit rough on the fingertips when winding, and is surrounded by rectangular pushers that are polished on their sides and brushed atop. Even without a screw-down crown and this more refined format, this B09 is surprisingly rated for 100 meters of water resistance, which is great to see in this format. Turning our attention to this watch's front-facing surface, we have a box section dome sapphire crystal keeping watch over a striking dial color beneath. While there are numerous design variations within Breitling's historical Premier collection of chronographs, the straightforward horizontal dual register display is a personal favorite. Beyond the layout, this dial's most evident attribute though has to be its color in this matte finish primary surface, here executed with what Breitling calls pistachio green. And honestly, I think they nailed the description of describing this shade of green. The unofficial color of watch designs for the last couple of years has been green, but among the very busy crowd of green, the dial shade here manages to leave a lasting impression that separates from the rest. At the Rehaut tachometer scale is printed with small black text with a polished ring just within that separates this scale from the central surface. Moving inwards, a printed minute track with tiny Arabic markers at the 5-minute positions frames an elegant set of applied indices, which are highly polished with the 2, 4, 8, and 10 o'clock markers interrupted by the running seconds at 9 and the 30-minute totalizer at 3. The sub-registers are finely textured with concentric circles and sit just below the dial's central surface, giving the overall look a pleasant and eye-catching 3-dimensional appearance. Dial text is not distracting by any means, with the applied Breitling B and the word mark at noon, and only Chronograph and Premier at 6. A syringe-style handset inlaid with luminescent material manages the time of the day, with a simple Chronograph seconds hand with a hollowed lollipop counterweight. Turning the watch over though, we have a sapphire exhibition case back, allowing an uninterrupted view of the in-house caliber B09 lying within. Breitling's automatic B01 caliber has, since its introduction in 2009, come to represent a definitive point of value for an in-house chronograph caliber from a major brand, both within Breitling's own collection and the general luxury watch market under $10,000. The B09 included here, which was released alongside this watch, is essentially a modified B01 caliber without the rotor and automatic winding mechanism. In terms of its characteristics, it is a vertical clutch operated column wheel, and like many other column wheel chronographs, operation at the pushers with this Premier model is particularly responsive and pleasing when activating the start, stop, and reset. In addition, the movement is certainly not a bad one to look at either, as it is on full display without the presence of an oscillating weight, fitting well within the 40mm case. The movement showcases laser engraving, Geneva striping across the bridges, and a polished chronograph drivetrain and column wheel. Yet perhaps more importantly, considering that you have a hand wind movement here, the B09 provides a 70-hour power reserve operating from a single barrel while still beating away at the Swiss standard of 28,800 vibrations per hour, or 4 Hertz. And while it isn't shouted from the rooftops with this model or any place on the dial, the B09 here is COSC certified, which means the caliber is certified to run between -4 to +6 seconds a day. And speaking anecdotally to the level of accuracy presented by this particular model, we did test it across 5 different positions. It was at +1 to +3 seconds a day across those 5 positions on average. So now to unpack when looking at this model and just some of my general takeaways on this piece. Now, I'm not gonna waste any time and say that this is probably one of my favorite Breitling models from their contemporary collection. I think this watch is simply beautiful. I would say from the negative side and why people might be against this piece and why it maybe hasn't gotten the same amount of love that I would think that this watch would perhaps garner is that it doesn't really look like a typical Breitling. And that's not a good or bad thing, I suppose. It's just, I would say some of the biggest proponents of the brand might not give this watch the greatest time of day. I think they will get more infatuated with some of the Super Oceans and of course the Navitimers and even something like the Chronomat that I would say is a bit more synonymous with this brand name of Breitling. And also the color as well kind of is a bit more polarizing compared to what you might see from some of their other offerings. But to me, this watch is fantastic. I think I've covered some other Breitlings on this channel, and I've looked at the Chronomats, which I think has some funky nature to it, which of course has its own audience. Then you have something like the Super Ocean, which was under the radar, but it's in a very busy dive watch category. And then you have the Navitimer, which is the Navitimer. It's iconic and really cannot be dismissed for what it represents for pilot watch chronographs in the marketplace. It really is probably one of the most definitive watches you're going to find of that ilk. But then you have this, and it's hard to put it in an exact box, but one thing I know for sure, this watch is very unique for where it represents. Manual caliber, B09 movement on the inside, pretty wearable all things considered for a mechanical chronograph. 13 millimeters thick might be the only metric where people are like, okay, I wish that was maybe a little bit thinner, but you compare that to the Speedmaster as an example, it is thinner. So I don't think that even really has much play here. The green dial, as I mentioned, now green has been beaten to death in the last few years, what we've seen with new releases. And I, for the most part, have become a little bit tired of seeing this. Now I feel like anybody that throws out a new green dial, if they're following the trend, I think you can tell when a brand is either following a trend or just creating a green dial watch just because they want to. When it's done well, it's done well. And this is one that is done incredibly well. It doesn't make this resounding statement as much as you might think by looking at some of the images of this. It's subtle in its own way, but still is enough to maybe pique some interest and grab some attention, but not so much so where it becomes a hard thing to wear. I think this is one of the coolest Breitlings, and I remember being in this large store with Kevin O'Leary. We're doing this shopping episode, and we're seeing some incredible pieces. And I remember it was his turn to pick out a watch, and I just locked eyes with this as we were kind of going through, and I'm like, okay, that just made an impression. And then I remember I went back to the space and I just wanted to take a closer look at this because it was able to, in a very, very impressive array of different watches that I was looking at during that day, allowed it to separate and be different. And that's what I think watches are all about. And I would say for Breitling, this is one of those examples of showing that they have really, I think, figured out some of their new product offerings. This watch is fantastic. Everybody else that was on the team that got to handle this watch a little bit more was very impressed with it. And I think this is a Breitling probably for those that maybe never considered Breitling. Sure, everybody knows about the Navitimer. Many know about the Super Ocean. Many also know about the Chronomat and some of their other options that are going to be maybe a little bit more out there, but of course, very Breitling. This isn't exactly that. It doesn't fit in the typical box that we associate with Breitling, but I think that's why it's so special. But all right, guys, that is my take on this Breitling Premier B09. What is your thoughts on this watch? Do you like it? Do you not like it? I like to hear just kind of some feedback on this one because like I mentioned, this isn't the conventional watch that you'll probably see from Breitling, but I think that kind of makes it unique. What is your take? Do you like it? Not like it? Leave some comments down below. Also, please give this video a thumbs up, subscribe, hit the bell icon. Really appreciate all the support. All of those things helps out the channel tremendously and allows us to continue to grow here. Definitely check out TeddyBaldassarre.com, full authorized dealer of 30 brands, quick and fast fulfillment, dedicated customer support, full factory warranty for all the products that we offer. Every product that's on the site is curated by myself and the team to make sure that if you buy something, you're gonna be happy with it. This is not like any other store online where you don't really know, hey, is this something that will check out for me as an enthusiast? Is this something that I could be happy to wear on my wrist? All of this was considered to great extent when we were trying to curate the watches that we offer on the site. And also every purchase helps support the content that we're creating here so that we can continue to foster a new generation of watch enthusiasts. But guys, thank you again so much for watching. Be well, and I'll see you all very soon.